Good afternoon, Ms. Nases. No, this will be the video lecture on the legal aspects in the tourism and hospitality industry. This one is a short lecture only about the business of transportation, which is, of course, can be found on. Okay, let me see the chapter first. Of course, this one will have something to do with the transportation business, which is also very important in the tourism and hospitality industry. Now, before I begin my lecture, of course, I have an announcement. This one is chapter 5, hospitality and tourism transportation. Also, the last video lecture or the last meeting that we'll be having will be on January 5, 2023. So this is the second last meeting that we'll be having. The last meeting will be on January 5. It's also a Thursday of next year, 2023. Okay? Then after that, I will be scheduling the final examination in this subject, perhaps the week after January 5. So wait for my video lecture on January 5 because I will be announcing the specific date of your final examination. Now, this one will be a very short lecture on the transportation business that is also very important in the hospitality and tourism industry. Now, of course, I think you already know that tourism and hospitality will always involve transportation. Of course, you have to bring passengers from one place to another. And of course, when we talk of transportation, there are different modes. Of course, we have the land, the sea, the air, and of course by rail. Of course, this one will have something to do by the mode on the land. So here, but this one is very popular in Europe, in European countries. So railways are used in Europe and also in Western America. Okay? So I'd like you to remember for the transportation business, of course, there is what we call, for the transportation business, what you should remember here would be, it has something to do with what we call the common carrier. Common carrier. And of course, if we have the common carrier, we also have the private carrier. These are classifications of what we call carriers. Carrier is the one that transports. Transports. What do they transport? Well, they transport people. They transport also goods. They also transport news. So these are the things that are being transported by the common carrier as well as the private carrier. Now, how do we distinguish one from the other? When we speak of a common carrier, what is that? Well, by the term alone common, this one, the common carrier, is one who is engaged or that is engaged in the business of transportation. A common carrier is one that engages himself to carry passengers, goods, or news as a business entity. Business entity. And of course, because he is engaged in the business of transportation, he is being paid by compensation. So you pay something because you are being transported. The services that you are in is or has something to do with transporting passengers or goods or news. Paid by, so there is a payment of the services rendered. Now, of course, when we talk of a common carrier, this one is open to the public. Open to the public, meaning to say that any person who wishes to avail the services of a common carrier that entity or that common carrier cannot deny, cannot deny or cannot uh, refuse his services to transport anyone who wishes to avail of the services of that common carrier. Now, as compared to a private carrier, when we talk of a private carrier, of course, he is not regularly engaged. No, this one, he is not regularly engaged in the business of transportation, but he is only his engagement has something to do only for a special purpose. For a special purpose. Let's say, for instance, you want to engage him for whatever purpose that might be, then you can do so. That is a private carrier. Also, he may also be paid by compensation because you will be hiring him or you will be engaging his services for a special purpose. But the difference lies here. Is it open to the public? The answer is no. Not only for a private purpose, for a special purpose. So definitely he is not, or this entity is not regularly engaged in the business of transportation or transporting people, goods, or use. Why does it matter? Why does it matter for us to know if a transportation is engaged in is one that is a common carrier or a private carrier? The reason being, when we talk of a common carrier, of course, it is required because you will be transporting anyone who avails of your service or services. Anyone who goes to you definitely has to be what? Has to be protected or should be carried to the place of destination without any harm or injury. In short, you have to be protected if you are being carried by or being transported by a common carrier. And this comes the concept on the diligence required. The diligence required of a common carrier. The diligence required. So what is the degree of diligence required of a common carrier? This is the very important issue here. The degree of diligence required. Now, in the case of a common carrier, because you need to be protected as a passenger, and that upon arrival in your destination or place of destination, there should be no any harm or injury that might be inflicted upon you. So the degree of diligence required in the case of a common carrier is one that is extraordinary. The degree of diligence would be an extraordinary diligence. Extraordinary diligence meaning, because of this word extra, it's not ordinary but extraordinary diligence. It is required that you have to be transported or carried to your place of destination without any harm or injury. Clear? And this is the degree of diligence required of a common carrier. But how about in the case of a private carrier? Remember, as I told you earlier, a private carrier is engaged only for the purpose of a special reason, a private carrier. So what do you think will be the degree of diligence required in the case of a private carrier? Now, of course, because this is a private carrier, we also expect the degree of diligence would be, of course, you will also be transported in the place of destination to your place of destination safely and without any harm. So what is required, of course, will be less than extraordinary diligence. So if you may say, maybe it's just an ordinary diligence. Right? So this is the difference. It will be less than extraordinary diligence, but it is also given that you should be transported in your place of destination safely and unharmed, of course, diba? Because that is what is being required of you. Okay? Now, when we talk of the diligence required, when we talk of the diligence required for a carrier, whether private or whether common or private carrier, common or private, now when is the degree of diligence required to be exerted? When? The question is when to be enforced. No? So the next question, because we already know the degree of diligence, of course the next question would be when. When do we enforce that degree of diligence required? Well, the general rule of course is that this degree of diligence will have to be enforced from the moment that the passenger or the goods had been unconditionally placed, no, in the possession of the carrier. Get that? So I repeat. So when do we enforce this degree of diligence? The general rule is that from the moment that passenger or goods had been unconditionally placed in the possession of the carrier. Until when? Well, until, of course, until he arrives safely to his destination. No? To his destination. So, this one, when we talk of the degree of diligence required of a carrier, when do we enforce that? Well, we enforce that all throughout the time or from the moment that the passenger or the goods have been unconditionally placed. The term there is unconditionally placed in the possession, unconditionally placed in the possession of the carrier until it arrives in the place of destination. Now, of course, when we talk of a common carrier, no, of course we have to concentrate on common carriers, no, not the private carriers, because of course your tourists will be using most likely a common carrier, no? Like say for instance, common carrier will be airlines, no? Like what's that? Ferries, no? In the case of sea, no? A ferry, no? And of course train or railway, you use that train or bus, no? That are intended to transport passengers. These are common carriers. Examples of common carriers: buses, trains, ferries, no, airlines. No? So those are the types of carriers. And of course, when a passenger would take any of this, that passenger has to be taken care of with extraordinary diligence. Clear, Snases? So that is what you should remember in the case of the business of transportation. Now, I'd like you to take this as your assignment. This is assignment number 11 as far as I know, because I have written down everything as your assignments. Now, number 1, why is the business of transportation important? No? Why is the business of transportation important in the tourism and hospitality industry? So that's number 1. Explain. So that's number 1. Okay, number 2, what are the different modes of transportation that are available to a tourist? No? Explain each one. I repeat, number 2, what are the available modes of transportation that are available to a tourist? Explain each one. Okay, then finally, number 3, differentiate or compare a common carrier from a private carrier and explain the degree of diligence required for each carrier. Okay, number 3, I repeat, differentiate or compare a common carrier from a private carrier and explain the degree of diligence required for each carrier. So I think that is all for today. As I promised to you, it's just a short lecture on the transportation business. So see you next year on January 5, 2023 with the grace of our Lord. Thank you.